Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Freedom Friday of the Daily Objective. And today we are joined by Jonathan Hoenig, and I also have my co-host Gloria. So hi, Jonathan, and hi, Gloria. Thanks very much for being with us. And today the daily objective is to understand what we mean by the notion of Americanism. And Jonathan, who is with us, Jonathan is a portfolio manager, but also, so he's in business, but also he's on the field of ideas. So he's the editor of a book called The New Textbook of Americanism. And we were together with Jonathan last year doing a tour in the UK and speaking to students about this idea of Americanism. And I was thinking that this is kind of a new way to put an old idea, but a very much needed idea on the table. So people quite often talk about American exceptionalism or the American way of life. But Jonathan, you brought the idea of Americanism as something like a political philosophy which stems from an overall philosophy. So what do you understand and what do we mean when we say Americanism?
Well, thank you, Nikos, and thank you, Gloria, for having me. I have to just say, even before we get started, that I've really enjoyed these presentations and the insight you guys are bringing to everyday tabletop issues, as they say, ripped from the headlines, including politics, which is certainly dominating the discussion here in the States. It's going to be even more so in the next couple of days and months as the election draws closer. Every candidate would tell you that they represent what America's all about, right? I mean, every candidate on every side of the aisle, both sides of the aisle, will say, well, I know what America is, and here's why. But Americanism is something. It is something very specific. And Rand, not in the last 30 or 40 years, but 70 years ago, she defined it in this book that I had the pleasure of editing, and that you helped me. We did a tour, as you said before. And it starts this question of, well, what is Americanism and which party or which candidate reflects it? It starts, in my opinion, and I think in this case in Rand's opinion too, not with talking about a party, a Democrat or Republican, not even talking about like an issue, where do you stand on guns or where do you stand on abortion or something like that. It starts by these basic principles. And Rand, starts the book, and she starts her prose on this philosophy, if you will, by asking, what is the basic issue in the world today? When you boil it all down, what is the basic issue? The issue is a question of a battle, if you will, of two principles: individualism and collectivism. That was true when Rand first wrote it in 1946, and it's certainly true now. And these are two diametrically opposed ideas. Individualism is this idea, I know that you and Gloria have talked about and quite extensively. Individualism is this idea that you have inalienable rights. They don't come at permission of a group, but you have them by the virtues of being a man. They're unconditional. And government's role is to protect those rights. Collectivism, and of course I'm summarizing here, says like you have no rights. It's all about the group. The group is the greater standard. It is the standard of value, and your purpose is to serve the group. And end of story. When you want to say what's America all about, it's not just pie in the sky or whatever we vote about, but whatever we vote on. It is something. America is the country of individualism. That's what it was based on at its premise, and that's what fundamentally it represents.
Right, but here's the difficult thing now when it comes about fighting the battle of ideas. Tribalism, which is viewing yourself, the world, and others through the prism of the group, is so big today. Tribalism in terms of race, in terms of gender. By the way, mentioning gender, I bet that, in the beginning of the summer, we saw race tribalism being the big issue. As we get to the election, I'm sure gender will also enter the agenda. But also tribalism in terms of conservatives versus republicanism. So we see two things happening at the same time. The one is that this polarization is very, very strong, but at the same time, more and more people are fed up with this whole system. So for example, we see Republicans being against Trump, and we see Democrats not being happy with Biden, although they're not happy with him because maybe he's not radical enough. So Gloria, you have experience from running an outsider's, let's say, campaign. Do you think there is space in this tribal atmosphere for an outsider's voice. So does this polarization, is this good for people like us? Because we can tell people, look, you can do better than that. Or is it that our voice is going to get lost in all the tribal noise?
Thank you, Nikos, and thank you, Jonathan. I actually, before answering, want to come to a point of what Jonathan was saying. The first confusion of why Americanism has gotten is because most Americans think that they live in a democracy. They even forgot that America was a project based on a republic. The difference of the majority that a democracy sometimes portrays versus a republic is that the individual, as Anne Rand and eloquently put it, is the most important and valuable minority of them all. That is the individual and his and her rights. So because the tyranny of majority sometimes would go against their individual rights, is that the founding fathers established a republic. Now, if you ask right now, Americans, they say, we live in a democracy. So even that makes room for the confusions and the abuses of power that have been occurring in America, not only recently, but it has been, like the enlargement of the state. Now, because of that, there's the tribalism that Nikos was Republican that are markets, and Trump has been an example of this, how he, sequestered basically the Republican Party into doing politics that are very much in the line of the Democrats. And then you have Democrats that are not happy with Biden. So I think there is room for a third way. Even in the last elections, the Libertarian Party was only 2 points from coming into the national televised debate, the presidential debate. And I think that third voice, just to be heard, would have been healthy for the democratic elections that were held in place between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Now, there is, for example, a libertarian female candidate, which in my opinion has better charisma and much more of a clear agenda than the one that Gary Johnson used to have 4 years ago. So I think that if people are really fed up and they are committing into finding new intellectual opportunities within politics, there is an opportunity in these elections.
Well, to be honest, I haven't checked too much on the Libertarian candidate this time because I've been so disappointed with the 2016 campaign that I kind of gave up. But that will be an interesting topic maybe for another Freedom Friday, like what's the role of the Libertarian Party, if there's such a role that the party can play. But another issue I want to discuss is that whether there's something very special in the historical time we live in which basically the idea of Americanism, people don't even pay lip service to it. Let me give an example. There's a very beautiful and powerful scene in Atlas Shrugged where the central planners are in a room in Washington taking horrendous decisions about the future of the country, and they see with the Washington obelisk, and they feel the moral gravitas of what it represents, and they feel uncomfortable, and James Taggart closes the curtains, shuts down the curtains because he can't even see it. Now, we live in times where a big part of the population, or an important part of the population, doesn't even consider that this legacy is worth protecting. So, for example, some people, hopefully a minority, ask for the statues to be taken down. Other people cannot even understand what America stands for. So, does this mean that?
Well, let me see, Nikos, if I could, on that and what Gloria said, could it be this candidate or that candidate? I think that is the issue, and that's the frustration now, is that there are no voices for individualism in politics today. None. Zilch. There are consistent voices for a mixed economy. There's consistent socialists in a higher elected office in America today, but there are no voices for individualism, for capitalism anywhere in American politics. And I'll quote Rand if I could. I mean, on Americanism, Rand says that, quote, an individualist is a man who says, I will not run anyone's life, nor let anyone run mine. I will not rule nor be ruled. I will not be a master nor a slave. I will not sacrifice myself to anyone or sacrifice anyone to myself. Now, that's just, there's no one talking like that. And my sense, if there was, they would get, unfortunately, laughed off the stage. Like, let me say, I pulled a quote now. You guys take a guess. Which candidate said this? I'm going to give you a quote. Which candidate for president said this? Quote, now it's our time. We must sacrifice together because we are all in this together. We'll come through together. Now, which candidate said that, Biden or Trump?
Not only it could be Biden and Trump, it could even be Ted Cruz, for example. I saw Ted Cruz, who is the guy who was quoting from Atlas Shrugged in the Congress. I saw him, for example, wanting the government to regulate Twitter. So, but you know what's the problem? As we
It was Trump, by the way.
Sorry?
It was Trump, by the way.
Oh, well, no surprise at all.
Yeah.
The problem though, Jonathan, is that as we reach the elections, the conservatives are going to do the usual blackmail. They're going to say, look outside, people are tearing down monuments. If Biden wins, this is what gets rewarded. Therefore, close your nose and vote for us. Or the Democrats are going to be, you people claim that you care about civil liberties. If you don't vote for Biden, this means that you endorse the xenophobia and all that stuff from Trump. So what's the defense to that? What's the defense to? I mean, we will be tempted, right? Some days before the election, everyone is tempted to kind of enter the tribal game.
Well,
if for nothing else, just to stick it to the other side.
It's to shorten what you said, I think a little, Nikos, it's a shit show. It's a just straight up shit show. So, should you vote for one collectivist or the other? I'm with Dr. Yaron Brook on this one to say, we've gotten the politicians we deserve. It's in effect too late to change the politics. That's why I wrote the book, was not to try to get, or not, excuse me, I didn't write the book. Why I edited the book was that, today's politicians, it's too late. What we need to be doing is, in my opinion, and what I'm trying to do is influence young people to have and to really believe in these ideas so that we get the next generation of politicians 8, 10, 15 years down the road. There's no shortcuts. I don't think you can elect the right type of politician until some part of the population actually believes in some of these ideas. But the expectation, and I was like, well, I'm going to have to sacrifice, and I'm going to have to, or have others sacrifice to myself. Joe Biden talks about sacrificing blue collar jobs in oil and gas in favor of clean energy. He was asked about that. But, Trump has asked Americans, they said, well, they got to sacrifice for the patriotic trade war with China. So, it just, sacrifice is just assumed in today's politics. And that's the antithesis of what real Americanism is.
And I think I saw Joe Biden tweet something about buying American stuff. So they're even ripping off each other. But here's an opportunity. So go on.
Oh yeah, I mean that's exactly what it is. Joe Biden just yesterday announced his buy American product, and Trump says he's ripping me off, and he's right. And they're both ripping off Senator Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, all these other leftist, mercantilist, haters of the free market. Trade is a great example of where there's no difference between today's so-called left and right. They're both vehemently anti-trade, and by extension, they're anti-life and anti-American. And there's no good choice.
There's always an opportunity to pitch for the excellent Harry Binswanger article, buying American is un-American, or something like that. So that would be sad with very black.
Yeah, I mean, Americanism means that you buy what you want, what serves your interests, that you're not a sacrifice for the nation, the people in your neighborhood, your color. You're only every day, you're one day closer to death. Live every day. If you want chocolates from, I don't know, France or leather from Italy, get what you want that makes your life better. But that's that collectivist nationalism that says, we're all in it together for the greater good. And what I buy has to be so-called help my neighbor. It's a very anti-American mentality, but both political parties harbor it. And that's what I'm saying. Who's a more individualistic choice for president? There are none. We should be, that's why I'm focusing on the schools, not on the ballot box.
Here's an opportunity, though. Here's a big opportunity. Rand was talking about radicals for capitalism, but now it's very clear and obvious who is the real radical. When you see, for example, all the big institutions jumping on the Black Lives Matter narrative, it's clear that's not a really radical narrative. So Gloria, you are charismatic in terms of social media campaigns, and you can pass the message to people. How do you think is the best way to make this case clear that, look, if you're intellectually curious, if you are independent thinking, if you're a real radical, we are the
real radicals.
Yeah. How do we make this, though, a big message, not only within our circles, but also kind of making it a big social political movement?
I think you have to take the conversation and bring it to places that no one else is taking it. For example, I used my genetic blender, the 23andMe genetic map, to portray how stupid is racism. Basically, I have so when you push the conversation into something that no one is expecting, like when you say, look, all this stupid nonsense about racism, if everyone just would get their genetic map and they would find out that we are all a mix of everything, what Yuval Harari so well explains in Sapiens, then we wouldn't be in this mess in the first place. And when you go out of the field with something that it's not even free market economics, it's not even about tax reduction, like when you try to find those philosophical explanations that people are not expecting, then you can win the battle and go beyond your own group. For example, when I was invited to CPAC 2016 to talk about why Latinos never vote Republican, well, of course, by that time already Trump had said that all Mexicans were criminals. That's not going to help. But I remember that when I was in CPAC 2016, everybody hated Trump. Nobody wanted Trump to be the Republican candidate. People inside of CPAC, they wanted either Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio, or there was another lady running. Anyhow, what I explained to them is Latinos come to this country after they ruined theirs with socialism. But when they come here, they don't understand, oh my God, finally, the land of the free and the home of the brave, where the government is limited, where free market is in place, the first experiment in humanity, where the individual was taken as the root of everything that is progress and not the government. Latinos don't get that. And now they are 60 million of them in the United States. So instead of Latin America become more of that individualistic spirit of the self-made man and let's embrace free market economics, now we even see the Chile of the Chicago Boys going into a disaster, and also a Latin Americans keep voting for more socialism, for the same things that they escaped from. Not only that, now you have white guilt, and you have Americans born and raised in America disgracing the history of this great nation and saying that being individual is being selfish, and that is selfishness is a sin, and that we should all distribute. And what I say to them is, look, if you want wealth distribution, go somewhere else in the planet. The exception was the United States, not the rule. So you have every other country with that mentality. But sadly, if the battle of ideas is not made correctly, like Ayn Rand did it in her time, and she also predicted that both conservatives and progressives were going to be the doom and the disaster of Americans, then it's going to be really hard, because you have immigrants that don't understand the history and the exceptionalism of America, and you have Americans that are disgracing the history of the United States.
Yeah, I mean,
so yeah, Jonathan, give us the final thoughts.
Quickly, I agree with so much of what you're saying here, Gloria, and share that frustration. I mean, so Nikos, at a time, as you said, we're kind of being forced to pick a side, if you will, at least how I'm approaching it, and this is certainly not Ayn Rand's perspective, or I'm only speaking on behalf of myself, is that I'm not picking in a side. I don't associate with being conservative or part of Republic. I mean, I haven't forever, certainly in recent times. And, you know, Rand talks about individualism and collectivism. It's not two sides of the same road, and you're just going to be in the middle. You know, they're both on one side, and the collectivism on one side, individualism is on a completely different road. So, you know, now during political season, my belief is don't talk about who's better on this particular issue, but talk about those issues and bring it back to those fundamental principles that you have a right to your own life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. You know, those platitudes are quoted, but people say, oh yeah, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. But we've really got to do something to help the steel workers or the environment or the people of color or whatever the tribal flavor of the group. So, you know, talk about the fundamental ideas. I think that's the only way to change the world. Today's crop of politicians are long gone.
And also, I really like that many of us or people who show up in the show, there's also the personal example. There are people who are like high energy, clever, happy people. So there is also a way to keep living your life and not getting immersed in this constant anger. Because there's almost, and I'm not saying this as a conspiracy theory, but there's almost an agenda of anger, because this tribalism is fed on anger, and it's fed by you being kind of constantly unhappy, angry, like, oh, see what they did today, they canceled this person, now it's our time to cancel that person. So sometimes it's good to kind of take a distance and realize this is not your fight. It's still a fight that needs to be won, because we have to live in a humane society, because otherwise we can't enjoy life. But at the same time, we don't need to get involved in the mud and get dirty. Anyway, we're past our time. Jonathan and Gloria, thank you very much for being with us. All the best to our audience. Keep watching, support the Iron Center UK, support Razi in the great work he's doing, and support the show. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend. Read the new textbook of Americanism, and all the best. Bye, everyone.